Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Leo. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm good. We've had this mini heat wave in the UK. We've kind of all been on the beach and feeling like we live in California when really we live in the UK. It's been great.
That sounds amazing. I think we have had the opposite. We had our heat wave and everybody got excited and thought summer was coming. And then it started raining this week and now it's like randomly cloudy. I put out my washing the other day and I don't even look at the weather anymore because I live in Barcelona. Of course it's not going to rain. So that's the default. And I bring out my clothes and close it rained. You're like, you gotta be kidding me. So the classic.
I love it. I love it. I mean, I don't want to sort of celebrate your bad weather, but it does. For some reason, it makes me feel good that the roles are reversed for once.
It is. I think we've concluded it can never be nice in the UK and in Barcelona at the same time. There has to,
That's right. Also, I think it's probably because it's so rarely nice in the UK that it probably feels like and it's so rarely not nice in Barcelona that it feels like it correlates.
It's true. Yeah.
Buddy, so great hanging out with you. Come on. What did you enjoy your time in London? It was pretty cool, wasn't it?
It was really, really cool. I think it was one of those days where on paper I should have been exhausted. But I guess it was just the adrenaline of the day. We didn't stop all day. I mean, I was like shoveling food down my face in the back of the room in between intros. But it was so much fun. I love getting to know different people on sort of a different level like that and being able to chit chat and find out something different and interesting about them, maybe that doesn't have to do necessarily with the industry. And then also being able to sit in on the sessions. I think a lot of times when you go to a conference, you have to kind of choose and you're sidled with other types of meetings and things. So this was nice to just be kind of focused in one place. It still felt chaotic, but fun chaotic. I absolutely loved it. What about you?
Yeah, it was fantastic. Well, I think the 1,300, 1,400 people were there, weren't they? Something roughly like that in the short stay summit. So it was fantastic. And kind of, I guess by mid-afternoon, I found myself quickly running around the vendor village just to find all the different snacks that the vendors were putting out, because I was I guess I didn't have much of an appetite early, but God, I was hungry. And I stumbled upon Guesty, who had the best donuts. So shout out to the Guesty donuts. They got me through. They definitely got. Oh, and also shout out to Diane, who was walking around with a big container of chocolate bars for everybody.
Yeah, that was
keep everybody
fabulous.
going. There's just a great energy. There's a great energy about a one-day show, I always think.
Very
And it really does. Like, I don't know. I'm really reticent to think that show should be any longer because I think it works stupendously well. The energy is great, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think having as well the Shorty Awards the night before, it was nice for those of us in the industry to kind of get some of that energy flowing the night before. And then, at the show, I love a one-day show as well. I think everybody brings their full game. Whereas I think sometimes the tendency when you have a 3-day show or something is the energy kind of drops or has like peaks and troughs. But yeah, this was great. Everybody seemed on great form, and it was really nice to just get together with everybody in the industry. It's I'm always reminded when I go to these conferences, like, what a cool industry we work in. I like genuinely love the people. Everyone is fun. Everyone is nice. Everyone is welcoming. I think there's very few industries that really are like that. And so it just reminds me how lucky we are.
Yeah, I agree. It's so good to hang out with you. It was nice to see our sort of occasional guest hosts as well. Boris Pavlov, Simon Lehman, obviously Andrew Fenner, organizer of the conference, was there. So that was great. We've got to get those guys back on. Sarah, here we are. We sit just about to head off for our Easter holidays in the continent of Europe and the UK. Tell me, what are you and Mauro doing? Anything? Nothing?
We are doing separate things because his cousin is coming, and so he's going to meet up in Italy with his cousin. His cousin's coming from Uruguay, so it's like his first Euro trip. I think he's like 19 or something, so he's gonna have a great time. The cousin. And then I have my little Easter group that I go away with. It's like my Easter friend group. And it's really strange because for all of us to get together in the year seems impossible. But there's like this unspoken pact that Easter is our time and nobody dare plan anything that's not together on Easter. And so it's really nice. We are going to go to the Pyrenees, which I love. My plan was to do some hiking, although I looked at the weather and it's basically going to be snowing every single day. I hate the snow and I do not hike in the snow. So I was looking forward to lots of like beautiful exercise outdoor time. And now I think I'll be with the lazy group. My friend that planned it, whenever he plans things, he was like, okay, so to this day we have this wonderful visit that we're gonna do. And for the crazy people like Sarah, there's an 18-kilometer hike. For the rest of us that are normal, we'll take like the ski lift and we'll meet you upstairs at the bar, like at the top of the mountain. We'll wait for you there with a book. So now I might be part of the ski lift vibe. There's no way I'm hiking up a mountain with snow. It's a no-go.
Well, look, you're gonna have a wonderful time. That sounds absolutely fantastic. I've got to ask,
Yes.
short-term rental or hotel, where are you staying?
Yeah, we actually are staying in short-term rentals. We found a couple of really cool properties that were super well priced. The good thing about going by car is that you have, especially when you're planning to visit a bunch of different towns anyway, is that you're not restricted to a specific city location where maybe things are more expensive. And so, yeah, we actually found really cool accommodation. We get to stay together the whole time. We're staying 2 nights in one house and 2 nights in another, and it's gonna be great. There's like 7 of us going, and so I always prefer that we can spend time together at night. We can cook nice meals at home. It's just a totally different vibe. So I'm excited. What about you guys? What are you doing?
Well, so I was raised Catholic, and as a committed atheist now, I love doing absolutely nothing at Easter. So it's my, like, I was in and out of that. I should have had a loyalty card. We're going to go on to loyalty points at some point. I should have had a loyalty card for the church when I was growing up, but we were in and out of there the whole time. But now I love doing absolutely nothing. So I've got a few people visiting me. My parents are going to come on the Friday. We're seeing Jasmine's family a little bit, and then hopefully we'll get out into the countryside and do some walking. So very, very, very chilled for us at the moment. Well, look, guys, let's get into it. Sarah and I have both got a highlight we want to share, and then we're going to talk about a focus of our article, The Path to Growing Alternative Revenue for Your Short-Term Rental Business, which is really interesting. And then an interesting one, which I'm going to go on, going to finish with, about could a tours and activities push from Google penalize OTAs? But
Good.
Sarah, tell us, what's caught your eye? I feel like you're all over this ongoing Vacasa situation, right?
Yeah, I am, but I'm gonna take a detour this week. I sent you this one, but I'm gonna go after another one that caught my eye, which is Airbnb's loyalty program with HotelTonight. This
Love
is
it.
one that when it first launched, I think there was a lot of skepticism because it seems at first glance so off-brand for Airbnb. Their whole brand to many people is short-term rentals, it's vacation rentals, it's a different type of accommodation. And it's sort of a way to escape the traditional hotels. Um, and then when they merged with Hotel Tonight, or they purchased Hotel Tonight 2019, I think, and there's not been a whole lot happening. Like aside from having some cross inventory, which never really took off, like there's not been anything really going on. And interestingly, in March, they finally actually announced a loyalty program, which we've been hearing a lot about. You and I have a healthy dose of skepticism about loyalty programs, I think. But this one in particular, I think we can talk a little bit about like why it's clever and maybe why it's potentially going to have some pretty strong headwinds. I think for me, like the clever side of it is the ability for Airbnb to now capture some of that like midweek demand that's more typical of business travel, where somebody might be more likely to stay in a hotel, and then they can use those points or credits against a weekend trip with the family, right? Where maybe they would prefer to stay in an Airbnb. So I think that is pretty smart. But I definitely see some headwinds. So I think for one, it does kind of put it in direct comparison with other OTAs and their loyalty programs. Like thinking, would you go to Airbnb and then separately to Hotel Tonight, because they're not going to merge the platforms, of course. So you have the loyalty point system but it's not a single booking platform. Is that really going to compete with like Booking.com's Genius program, where you go to Booking.com and you can choose from anything? I don't know. And then I think again, there's the identity crisis of Airbnb. Does it lose some of its, I don't know, I guess what makes Airbnb Airbnb? Is it losing some of its DNA by this sort of partnership? Or is it a benefit? And then I think as well, just as we always talk about, like people are so skeptical now of loyalty programs. Like, am I really gonna book specifically on Airbnb because I have this loyalty program, or am I just gonna look for the cheapest accommodation that meets my needs for the dates that I want to travel, regardless of where that happens? And I think for me, like depending on the price of that is a 10% discount because that's basically what they're talking about. It's like a 10% credit on Airbnb from using HotelTonight. I don't know if it's enough to tip the needle um, in favor of people only booking on Airbnb, for example, just because they have these points. I don't know. What do you think, Leo?
I'm glad you raised it. Of course, a better podcast co-host would have read your WhatsApp message that says you were going to focus on this and not the Casa article. But well, you styled it out so well, Sarah, like it was planned. Must be a better co-host. Okay, great. So yeah, I mean, this also caught my eye. Look at us both with the highlight. There you go. No, I feel like at some point clearly Airbnb was going to try and bring these two businesses together in some way, shape, or form. But this is the way to do it, but while still very much acknowledging that Airbnb is the brand, is the business, right? And they're trying to feed more guests into Airbnb. So it feels to me like they're trying to have a bit of a Marriott Bonvoy moment. So it's bringing across that hotel guest into the short-term rental space. However, HotelTonight is not the biggest and most sort of well-known business. So I don't quite know what the throughput will end up being from one to the other. It is a good way of dipping your toes in loyalty, though, in plain sight, without it costing you much. It's a no booking, no pay scenario, and maybe it raises some well needed publicity for HotelTonight at the same time. I think what's fair to say is that I think you said this yourself, and I agree. I don't think we're ever going to see these two property types side by side on either platform the way you do on Booking.com. And that still, to me, is their biggest challenge in Europe at the moment. If we make it about Europe, is the fact that the European market for short-term rentals is very regulated. So if I'm plotting my trip with my friends in Barcelona, in Milan, in London, I might be on Booking.com simply because I know I'm going to have all the variety of properties and lodging types available to me but by the click of a button. I might even see a yurt. I might even see a container ship. I might even see a hotel. I might even see a short-term rental side by side, technically on a Booking.com for an urban stay. So it'll be interesting to see if it is successful, whether they are then tempted to try and, start showing as flags on the map. So I don't think they will. And again, to give Marriott Bonvoy their credit, they are able to bring a huge swathe of new guests into the short-term rental space, and that is what short-term rental operators are saying they're loving the most about being on Marriott Homes and Villas. I just don't think Airbnb is going to be able to pull that off. So I think the biggest impact this piece will be as a PR piece for HotelTonight and more of a press piece than in actuality any real benefit.
Yeah. I would tend to agree. I think, remains to be seen if for me, it wouldn't be enough to book just on Airbnb because I have points, or book just on HotelTonight because I have some kind of Airbnb loyalty. So I don't know. That wouldn't be enough for me, but time will tell.
I just wish my life was spontaneous enough that I could be a HotelTonight customer, as if with two small children, that's happening for me anytime soon. But there you go. Look, I think it's an interesting one though. One for us to keep track on. Let's do a very quick for Castle Watch. I know that the US team are talking about it all the time, so you don't need to hear too much from us on this. But I think it's interesting because I think what's at stake, right? Are we seeing potentially more of the same from the bid that is now seeming to be back on the consideration desk for all of the shareholders, or are we seeing the franchise model, which is we're seeing the marrying of those, the potential choice of those shareholders is do we Do we go with the Casco model? Do we think about something new, or do we seem to go with the offer where they just seem to keep raising the price to try and win the business? Don't know. Like, it's really hard to say, isn't it? Again, I'm not. I don't feel like I'm on the inside of this deal, but it does feel like there's continuous noise about this, and maybe there's something more in it. Like, just very quickly before we move on to our main articles, any thoughts from your side? Too early to call still?
It's too early to call still for me, and I feel like a bit like I have whiplash. Every time that we think we know what's gonna happen, something else comes in. And also, I'm also wondering if I was a shareholder, if those shares are gonna be bought out anyway, and all you get is a payout, do you really care who it goes to, or are you just going with the highest bidder? And so I think, yeah, unless it's unless it's more of a strategical thing and there's people who have obviously like more of their heart in it. Um, I just don't know if I'm skeptical about the fact of, do people really care? Like, when you purchase a stock, you purchased it because you hope it was going to go up. It's already plummeted. Take the highest bid and like get out. Just from a shareholder's perspective, right? Without making any kind of judgment on what would be better ultimately for Vacasa or for the future of the property or for the future of that business. Um, I think that's where my mind goes, because previously for me, it wasn't maybe quite enough to tip the needle, but now it's like an additional, 50 cents over a share from the Casco offer. And it also seems like it keeps just pushing both offers up. It's like a really interesting bidding war almost to me, right? When you think something's about to happen. So I don't know, definitely stay tuned, but I would take the money and run.
I think I would too.
There's a shareholder. I want
I mean, it is, isn't it? Like an underperforming business, and the bidding war still happening. There's clearly people see the market as being strong enough that they can turn this thing around in some way, shape, or form. Let's keep an eye. We'll leave it to the US team to deep dive as per though on this one. Okay, gang. Let's start with an article that really caught my eye this week. Could a tours and activities push from Google penalize OTAs? And this is a really well written article in FocusWire. Google is refocusing on tours and activities, right? Using its things to do B2B tool. Sarah, have you used this tool before?
I have never used this tool. No, I mean, the only thing I really know about Google is like reviews. That's the only thing I think about. Google reviews and Google Maps. But no, I've never used the tool. Tell us about it, Leo.
Well, they seem to be making more of a play on it, because it has sat there, I guess. Like, Google build things, don't they? And then they refocus them and put more behind them. But what it's trying to do is connect travelers directly with local tour operators. So showing the options that are available to you without necessarily redirecting you to TripAdvisor, Airbnb experiences, Expedia. And it seems that there has been a major decline in organic search traffic from around mid-December. So coming from Google to these experiences, tours and operator OTAs, as Google is prioritizing official operator websites over OTAs. And also this has been compounded or driven by, but I assume compounded by, the dominance of AI in the Google search, in the search page. And we know that search results are being pushed down with AI taking over more of the screen. And that, I guess, is also driving this. But it's really interesting. It's interesting because we always seem to talk about tours and activities and who should be owning that spot. I think as a pair, we haven't quite worked out who we think should be owning it. I like TripAdvisor, I like Viator, TripAdvisor owning it, but most searches will start on ChatGPT, on Google Gemini, and therefore, if you can be offering people a link straight to that customer in the most direct way possible, and then you back that up with this things to do. So in essence, trip planning, grow into this trip planning side to, and ChatGPT has operator, and this might be Google's play on that. You're going to completely disrupt that market. And what so I did a bit of research. I had a look on Google things to do, and the first page I hit was an application page for you to put your business on there, and it wasn't for OTAs. It was certainly for direct businesses. Why is it interesting? again, I've got to be careful. I'm not just trying to reinforce beliefs I already have here, but I don't know. We talk about this a lot. Today it's tours and activities. Tomorrow, is it short-term rental? Is it a challenge to short-term rentals? Is it a challenge? Is it more of a challenge to hotels? No, I think potentially the Digital Markets Act might slow Google down. The European Digital Market might slow Google down on this, but it's part of, I guess, having gatekeeper status is that they should be promoting operators, and if they are promoting operators, that might mean that they are in line with it. So I would just have a pause and a reflection for a moment and say, if you are Airbnb, Expedia, Booking.com, and you've not been able to pull your user onto your app and make their buying journey start in your app, if their buying journey starts on Google still, and you're paying Google to have that person click through and find your website, this is a real challenge to that. It's a real challenge if the behaviors that they're exhibiting here are paralleled in the short-term rental accommodation space, because suddenly someone's going, I want to stay in the Pyrenees with my 7 friends. Sarah wants to do 18-kilometer hikes. And they go, oh, I know Sarah does, but John wants to sit at the bar and drink a mojito. It wouldn't be a mojito, would it? In that time of year, it's a terrible thing to say. It'd be a glass of red wine, wouldn't it? And then they send you the first set of organic, direct to customer website links that you have a look at. So for me, it's interesting because I find tools and experience is interesting in and of itself, but because I think the learning here could be very interesting for our short-term rental industry. What do you think?
I'm of two minds, Leo. Part of me likes it because I like when the little guy wins, and I like the concept of kind of Google going back to actually recommending the real page, the official website for a specific thing. My question, and I guess my hesitation about this, is more surrounding how do you know if you want to book that or not? So I think one of the things that people like the OTAs for is that you have this kind of vote of confidence. You know that the only way you can leave a review for that property or for that activity is if you booked it through that OTA. And so presumably they're real reviews. Whereas we know that Google has had often all kinds of issues with fake reviews because you don't have to have a specific booking in order to leave a review. And so if you do a Google search and you want to do some certain activity, who tells me that that property is actually going to be nice? And I think that's one of the biggest contributing factors that has allowed travel, I think, to really take off and boom. Like you would never have historically. Those are why I think loyalty programs don't work as well, right? Like historically, it was like, okay, you're going to stay at the Hyatt because you know that Hyatt has a certain quality, or the Marriott or the whatever. And so you're going to be loyal to that. The same with airlines. Whereas now, like, I don't know, all the airlines are equally terrible, really. Like, who's actually nice to you anymore on an airline? Everything's extra. Like, what's the real difference now between like Air France and Vueling? Nothing. There's just so much convergence that like it's becoming noise. And I think with this one, the challenge is going to be, especially if for not only for tours, but I think, the piece you bring up about short-term rentals, while at first it sounds exciting, I think that the reason that the majority of short-term rental managers and owners still struggle to get these direct bookings is because there's not the verified review segment. So like, unless you have
trust,
there's the trust, unless you have a user who like, okay, I'm going to go search for this on the OTA. I'm going to review the reviews on the OTA. And unless Google's able to pull those in and synthesize those and prioritize, although it may sound counterintuitive, prioritize reviews that are coming from certified OTAs where somebody's actually booked the experience, I think they're going to have a hard time getting that trust. And I think the bookings are going to be fewer and farther between.
Let's keep talking about trust because I think it's an interesting debate. We've had it in different ways, and now we'll have it through this prism. I think this explains maybe something we talked about a few weeks ago. Why, let's talk about Airbnb as the biggest, as the company in the space that gets its host the most bookings. This, I think, perfectly explains why they are happy to remove listings from the platform that don't hit their quality bar, and they're quite aggressively trying to do it, or listings that aren't behaving in the way that Airbnb wants them to behave. Hosts that are doing communicating with guests in the way that Airbnb doesn't want them to communicate with, et cetera, because they understand, I think, that they need to have a way to differentiate themselves, right? So this is really interesting. So you can view these two things in parallel. And if you are a short-term rental host, I think it's also really interesting because you then got to think about how you create trust on your website to ensure that if your guest is finding you through conventional search, ChatGPT, Google Gemini search, they feel like that's a place where they can complete their booking and feel like they're not going to get their credit card details replicated and the property is going to exist. So that's why this is especially interesting right now, because you're right. Trust. People trust a couple of those brands. And the challenge is making sure that while this technology is available to make all of this direct booking possible, is the will of the customer there. And you have to help your customer get there.
Completely agree. Yeah. I mean, and I know that there are softwares out there, many PMSs, for example, like if the property is listed on OTAs as well as the on booking website, like it can pull in the reviews from all of the different OTAs and that can be listed on the website. I don't know. It's so easy to fake stuff. Like if you can do a deep fake video of Trump saying anything or of Obama saying anything, or I don't know, what else can you fake? And you can certainly fake a website with fake reviews. So
you're right. No, you're absolutely right. It's the real question of the time, isn't it? Great. Sarah, let's do it. Tell us about your article this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one is a really interesting one and maybe actually a solution to what we just talked about in that sort of trust element. So this is an article from FocusWire, the path to growing alternative revenue for short-term rentals. The crux of this article is something that we will all be familiar with, which is the tightening of margins for many property owners and operators. STRs are struggling to make the numbers work. Rising costs, rising labor costs, higher guest expectations, and especially expectations of that experience that they're going to have, but they don't want to pay more for. It's definitely starting to affect the margins that many operators are working with. And so the interesting one for this article is talking about alternative revenue streams, among which are things like including access to tours or maybe transportation to and from the venue. I think this is like a super interesting one, especially when you're talking about a villa that might be, 50 kilometers away from the nearest airport, and you have a group with children and whatever, and they don't want to have to rent a car. I think that's a very interesting one. And then all sorts of other types of add-ons. So that can be everything as simple as like a late check-in, late checkout or early check-in. But it can also be additional services while at the property. So it can be like, get the romantic package where we'll get a bottle of cava for you and some chocolates and rose petals on the bed or whatever. It could also be something that is completely outside and ancillary. Maybe it's okay, come join a local pottery class, or like the one you went to with the farm. Imagine like, okay, hey, you can play with you can feed the animals for £5 each or something like that. And of course, these are all examples, but I know for a fact that in many PMS providers now are sort of incorporating the idea of being able to offer these ancillary services. And it definitely is a way to increase the revenue of the overall booking. So this has been sort of a proven concept that it does work. I think the challenge is that with the struggling margins just for the management of the property, especially for the smaller operators, this can be a struggle to be able to add something additional, especially if they start adding, 20 different services at once. And so then they would need to focus on, okay, what are the ones that are going to make me the highest margin? And we're going to see the most bang for my buck.
It's such an interesting topic. You're right. Such an interesting topic. I still think, and the article says this, I didn't come up with this idea. I read it and I completely agreed when I read it. That people associate concierge and experiences more with a hotel stay typically than with a short-term rental. You think there's going to be that warm, cozy invitation to try this and do that, and recommendations are on site, and especially like a really good hotel. I'm thinking, White Lotus, we've all been watching it, have you been watching it? So good.
I
You know,
I need to
oh,
start.
come on,
Everyone else is
come
watching
on,
it.
mate,
I know it's the only one.
come on. You know, and as an industry, we know that there are like technologies we can leverage to begin to personalize that experience for our guests, and that's the place to start, right? But it's also not it's definitely not the place to finish, because that can just look like a very cheap way of upselling some additional services. What you're trying to do is bring hospitality back into the heart of it, of what you're doing. So you're using technology to free yourself. I think I actually said this last week, to repeat myself. You're using technology to leverage, like, being able to then maybe offer a bit more in-person concierge to people, which means you can, of course, you can monetize that. You wouldn't be doing it if you couldn't, but you're also making that stay even more wonderful for your clients. And I think that's really important to remember. So it's very easy to say you're doing this and say you've got upsells and go and buy an off the shelf upsell kit, but it doesn't really do anything for your customer because it's not tailored, and they're just going to end up on Google or ChatGPT anyway, because they didn't feel like it was offering them anything that was particularly unique. Or you can take the view of companies that, as they mature, we've got lots of companies in our space that are maturing at the moment. They've built really good operations and they've got a lot of staff. They are then able to do things like handheld concierge when someone's spending more than X amount of euros per night, going and visiting them, recommending things that suit their market. So if you're in a ski town, it's more straightforward, right? Build your brand around that, get their lift passes for them, events like, let people do tobogganing and things, things that are away from just the typical that the typical day at the ski slopes, like going to spas and saunas, all of that stuff. But that's a really, really good example of someone understanding their market, starting there and going, what experience can I drive instead, and personalizing that whole experience to what they know people want to do in their market. So I think there's opportunity, but there's also, you've got to work at it. There's a lot of work involved.
Yeah, because we haven't said it on the episode yet today. Again, it benefits the hyperlocal operators. It really does. It benefits those who can create something unique, and can make the experience like, either it has to be completely unique or it has to be easy. So you're in a ski town. Okay, you're in a ski town in Switzerland, let's say. Okay, maybe you have a package which is the actual property itself, but it includes your ski passes and it includes a set menu at a famous fondue restaurant, and you have like a standing agreement, I guess, maybe with the owner of the restaurant, where your guest can get a certain discount, or they always have this certain table reserved at 7 p.m. on Fridays. I don't know. I think it's thinking outside of the box a little bit, and making it easy. I think one of the things that people are willing to pay for these days is something that feels like it has the ease of a packaged holiday without being a packaged holiday. Like, they don't want to be on this like tour bus with all these people, maybe, but especially for people who have kids or for larger groups, to be able to arrive and be like, great, we've got all this settled, and not have to be looking at, okay, what's the best spa? What's the whatever? As long as, if that's been done and curated already by a local who knows everything and is hopefully already suggesting the best of the best, then it's a big bonus. But it has to be done right. And I don't think it's something that, an operator that isn't hyperlocal is going to be able to do. So
I really like the way you put that. I couldn't agree more. The package holiday is a big block of chocolate. The approach that works is providing a box of chocolates, and then if people pick the ones they want. I've inadvertently finished with a Forrest Gump quote, but I made it. I sort of did it in a more English way than Forrest did back in the 90s. Gang, that's it. We're on time. We've got to go. If you've enjoyed today's show, please hit like, share, subscribe, and all the usual social places. We're going to finish in a slightly different way this week by saying, Sarah and I had the honor of spending some time with Paul Stevens last week. Paul finished his tenure with short-term rentals and got an amazing send-off at the Shorties. Paul has been the journalist that we've used the most on the show. So we just wanted to say, Paul, if you're listening, and anyone in the industry who loves Paul, as all of us do, should I say, good luck, buddy, in whatever you choose to do next. You've been an amazing servant to our industry.
yeah, good luck, Paul. We're so proud of you and really excited to see what's coming for you next. I'm sure whenever Paul has something to share, we'll have him on and let him do a little bit of
Oh yeah,
question answering. We'll pummel him with questions.
True. I thought he was guest host in Vegas as well. Of course, yeah, we've got to get him on as a guest host. All right, gang. Thanks so much. We'll see you all next week.